A Tale of Sorcery by Colfer. Chapter 1. The Radius Empire. It had almost been a year since the Southern Kingdom's last sunrise. The citizens would never forget the horrifying afternoon when Prince Seven Galvant marched his Radius army of the dead through the countryside and took Chariot Hills by storm. There the prince sat upon his late grandfather's throne in the Champion Castle and declared himself not the new king of the Southern Kingdom, but the emperor of a new Radius Empire. Unfortunately, there was nothing anyone in the Southern Kingdom could do to stop him. It was well within the prince's legal rights to change his newly inherited kingdom however he wanted, but not even his most loyal followers could foresee the horrors he had in mind, and soon they began to resent the monster they had helped create. The emperor's first act was to dissolve the Southern Kingdom's military and replace it with his army of the dead. His second act was to strip the justices of all power and give their positions to the clansmen of his devoted Radius Brotherhood. Third, the emperor would eradicate the Southern Kingdom's constitution and created a new one based on the principles of the Brotherhood's oppressive Radius philosophy. Under the new laws, all schools and churches were shut down. The only thing citizens were allowed to study or worship was the emperor himself, and all markets and shops were boarded up. Food and supplies was now distributed at the emperor's will. All the talking creatures, elves, dwarfs, trolls, goblins, and ogres, were exiled to their respective territories and banned from returning. The borders were permanently closed, and any communication with the outside world was strictly forbidden. The emperor also placed his entire population under harsh curfews and social restrictions. No one was allowed to be outdoors from dusk till dawn. Citizens needed permission to travel beyond their homes, and it was illegal for people to gather with anyone outside their immediate family. Additionally, all forms of creative expression, such as art, music, and theater, were outlawed. The only clothes the citizens were allowed to wear in public were the drape black uniforms the emperor provided. Private residents were routinely searched for money, jewelry, weapons, and other valuables, and they were taken as donations to the empire. The emperor's dead soldiers patrolled the streets day and night to make sure the new laws were being followed, and the walking corpses weren't shy about making grotesque examples out of people who disobeyed. So the citizens stayed in their homes to avoid trouble, all the while praying for something or someone to liberate them from this new nightmare. However, the most severe change to the Constitution was the law regarding magic. The empire sentenced people to death simply for sympathizing with the magical community. The broad decree gave the emperor the right to imprison anyone he thought might be supporting his magical enemies. In the months following the emperor's succession, the army of the dead rounded up 100 magic sympathizers, and they were quickly sentenced to hang without any evidence or trial. Strangely, though the verdicts were rushed, the actual execution were put on hold. The emperor never gave an indication of what he was waiting for, but secretly he was given the executions for a very strategic occasion. In his first week of power, the emperor demolished the University of Law in the Chariot Hills town square and constructed a massive Colosseum in its place. The Colosseum towered over the other buildings in the capital. It had enough seating for thousands of people and was purposely built for only 2 entrances, making it difficult to enter and exit. The project was finished just 2 weeks before the Radius Empire's 1-year anniversary. On the evening of its completion, the emperor ordered all citizens of Chariot Hills to the Colosseum to witness the delayed execution of the magic sympathizers. The Radius Brotherhood, dressed head to toe in their ghostly silver uniforms and armed with their glowing bloodstone weapons, herded the tired, hungry, and dejected citizens into the Colosseum. The Emperor was already there when his people arrived, and standing in a private balcony at the very top of the Colosseum. He radiated crimson light thanks to his bloodstone suit, cape, and crown that curled around the side of his face like a horns of a ram. The Emperor never looked down at his citizens. The Emperor never looked down as his citizens filled the seats. He only had eyes for the land surrounding the Colosseum. He held a pair of binoculars tightly against his eyes, scanning every inch of the horizon and every patch of the evening sky. Your Greatness, the Emperor's High Commander bowed as he stepped onto the balcony. The citizens are seated and the soldiers are in position, sir. And the archers? Seven asked. Stationed throughout the Colosseum and on every rooftop of the capital. And entrances? Completely surrounded, sir, the High Commander said. I'm confident we've created the most secure structure in the world. Secure enough for her, High Commander? Seven pressed. If she finds a way inside, she won't get out alive. Seven grinned under his binoculars, but didn't lower them. Good, he said. Let's begin. The High Commander hesitated. Sir, are you certain she'll show? Given the extra security measures, it would be extremely risky for... Trust me, High Commander, she'll take the bait, Seven said. Now proceed. I've waited long enough for this moment. With that, the High Commander turned on his heel and faced the center of the Colosseum. At his signal, two clansmen began turning a lever, and a heavy cage door opened behind them. More clansmen came through the door, escorting over 100 prisoners from the dungeon below ground. The hands and feet of the magical sympathizers were wrapped in thick chains, and they could barely shuffle forward as the clansmen shoved them into the arena. Although the citizens wanted to scream at the sight of their friends and family in chains, they remained as quiet as possible. Still, a few cries escaped their lips and echoed through the quiet Colosseum. Start with the Evergreen family, Seven called over his shoulders. 5 clansmen plucked the 5 members of the Evergreen family from the long line of prisoners. Justice Evergreen and his wife, their sons, Brooks and Barry, and Barry's wife, Penny, were all dragged up the steps of a tall wooden gallows and placed in a row behind a single noose. The citizens were impressed by how stoic the Evergreens remained. Some of them even seemed eager to be there. Mrs. Evergreen eyed the noose with a wide and creepy smile. Penny was so excited she was practically buzzing, and Brooks gave a thumbs up to the people in the crowd. How dare you treat us like criminals, Justice Evergreen shouted. For God's sake, I am a justice of the Southern Kingdom. I've devoted my life to preserve the law. No, you were a justice, Seven scoffed, and soon you'll cease to exist at all. Shall we start with the former justice, my lord? The High Commander asked. No, hang the younger brother first, Seven instructed. If that doesn't get the fairy godmother's attention, nothing will. The clansman pushed Barry forward and fastened the noose tightly around his neck. Oh, woe is me, Penny cried. I can't believe I am about to witness my husband's death. What a cruel world. Don't worry, Jenny. I mean Penny. Barry could barely speak with the robe around his throat. It'll all be over soon. But please show him some mercy, his wife pleaded. I suppose in some ways hanging him is rather merciful, Brooke said. It's much quicker than being burned, drowned, crucified, or boiled, and it isn't nearly as messy as beheading, impaling, drawing, and quartering, crushing by stones. Psst, Brooks, Justice Evergreen whispered. Zip it, it's not your turn to speak. Oh, sorry, Brooks whispered back. I didn't realize I said that out loud. Well, I agree with my son, Mrs. Evergreen announced theatrically, making sure everyone in the Colosseum could hear her. You call this a public execution? I've been to tea parties that were more menacing. Come on, Emperor. You can do better than this. Give us blood. Give us suspense. Give us absolute terror. Mrs. Evergreen stared up at the Emperor with large, accelerated eyes, as if she was daring him to order a more gruesome death for her son. Justice Evergreen groaned and gave his family members a dirty scowl. Guys, we all agreed to stick to the script. Stop going rogue. You can't expect a mother to remain silent at a time like this, Mrs. Evergreen proclaimed. I want what's best for my son, and that includes his execution. Justice Evergreen winced and slapped an open palm against his forehead. Had I known you were going to act like this, Mrs. Evergreen, I never would have asked you to be my wife, he grumbled. Everyone, just shut up. I'll do all the talking from now on. The observing citizens around found the family discussion peculiar. Confused looks were exchanged throughout the Colosseum. Even the Radius Brotherhood were scrunching their foreheads under their masks. The Emperor, on the other hand, wasn't paying any attention to the Evergreens. He had other concerns. Something is wrong, Seven muttered to himself. She should be here by now. Her favorite brother is seconds away from death, and she's nowhere to be found. The Emperor's heart was racing with anticipation. He feverishly scanned the horizon with his binoculars, worried he had missed something. Hang him on 3, the High Commander yelled to the gallows. No, this can't be right, Seven thought. She would rather die than let her family be perished. 1! So where is she? Why hadn't she flown to the rescue? What is she waiting for? 2! Unless, Seven said as he struck by the troubling thought, she's already here. 3! The Emperor spun around and faced the gallows. The floor dropped out from beneath Barry's feet, and his body fell straight through the wooden platform. The horrified crowd gasped. However, the prisoner's neck didn't snap as they expected. Instead, Barry Evergreen's neck began to stretch and stretch like a rubber band until both of his feet touched the ground. All the citizens throughout the arena screamed. A few even fainted. That's not Barry Evergreen, Seven shouted from the balcony. The jig is up, just as Evergreen told his family. It's time to go. It's go time. Suddenly, the chains wrapped around the Evergreen's bodies evaporated into thin air. The family pulled the skin off their faces and hair off their heads. They had been wearing enchanted disguises the entire time. As the wigs and masks were removed, the imposters' true identities were revealed. Justice Evergreen was a chubby young woman with white feathers for hair. Mrs. Evergreen was an enormous doll with button eyes and burlap flesh. Brooks was a walking plant with chlorophyll skin and leaves growing from its scalp. And Penny had wings, bulging eyes, and a stinger like a giant insect. As if his skull was made of clay, Barry's head slipped completely out of the noose, and when he removed his disguise, he turned into a young woman with whiskers and a skunk tail. We've been deceived by witches, Seven screeched. If that wasn't enough to shock the crowded arena, the 5 clansmen at the gallows abruptly flung off their silver uniforms, and 5 very colorful young people appeared. The first was a young man in a metallic golden suit, with fire burning on his head and shoulders. The second was a young woman with curly dark hair who wore a robe made of gleaming emeralds. The third was a girl with a bright orange beehive and a dress made from dripping patches of honeycomb. The fourth was a girl in a sapphire bathing suit, whose hair flowed down her body like a continuously flowing waterfall. And finally, the fifth was a beautiful young woman in a sparkling pantsuit, wielding a crystal wand. It's the Fairy Council, Seven roared. Kill them! Kill them all! The archers throughout the Colosseum aimed their crossbows at the newcomers. Bristol Evergreen pointed her wand at Stitches, Sprout, Beebe, and Pip, and broomsticks appeared in their hands. The witches hopped aboard the broomsticks and flew in circles around the arena. The citizens and clansmen ducked and dived out of the way as the witches looped through the air, mere inches above their heads. The motion discombobulated the archers, and they didn't know where or who to shoot first. Fools! Don't let them distract you, Seven ordered. Fire at the fairy godmother. She's the priority. Xanthos, Skylene, give me some steam, Bristol said. A fiery jet erupted from Xanthos' stretched palms, and a geyser of water sprayed from Skylene's index fingers. The fire collided with the water, creating an enormous cloud of steam. Bristol waved her wand, and a strong wind blew the steam around the center of the Colosseum, blocking the fairies and prisoners from the archers' sight. "Why aren't you shooting?" Seven screamed. "Sir, the archers can't see where they're firing, and we still have men down there," the High Commander said. "I don't care who or what they hit. Just fire," Seven ordered. The archers fired their crossbows, and bloodstone arrows whizzed through the center of the Colosseum, barely missing Bristol and her friends. The clansmen among them tried to use the prisoners as human shields. Bristol waved her wand again, and the cowardly clansmen joined the cloud of steam and whirled around the fairies like they were caught in a powerful tornado. The archers lowered their crossbows, afraid they might hit fellow clansmen. The Emperor hollowed with rage at the Brotherhood's incompetence. He dashed to the other side of his balcony, and he called to the dead soldiers, patrolling the entrance. "Guards, get in here and attack these heathens. It's not a single witch or fairy leaves this Colosseum alive. Emeralda, quick, free the rest of the prisoners from their chains," Bristol instructed. While the army of the dead rushed inside, Emeralda dashed from prisoner to prisoner and turned their chains into a weak talc stone that crumbled off their hands and feet. "Lucy, Tangerina, block the entrance before the soldiers get in," Bristol said. The girls raced to the entrance on the opposite side of the Colosseum. Lucy hit the ground with a fist, and a giant crack zigzagged across the earth. The crack hit the first entrance like a bolt of lightning, and causing the doorway to implode before the dead soldiers could get through. Tangerina set her swarm of bumblebees into the second entrance, and the bees doused the approaching soldiers in honey, sticking them to the floor and walls. Soon the entrance was jammed by sticky skeletons. The entrances are blocked, but that means there are exits too," Lucy announced. "How are we going to get the prisoners to safety?" "Leave that to me," Bristol said. Bristol pointed her wand at the prisoners, and each one's body was surrounded by a giant bubble. To the prisoners' amazement, the bubbles rose into the air, carrying them high into the evening sky. Once all the prisoners had floated out of the Colosseum, Bristol pointed her wand at Emeralda, Xanthos, Tangerina, Skylene, and Lucy, and then waved it around herself. She and her friends joined the prisoners in bubbles of their own, and Stitches, Sprout, Bibi, and Pip followed on their broomsticks. After the fairy departure, the cloud of steam in the arena slowly faded away from the whirling clansmen, and the whirling clansmen dropped to the ground. The citizens cheered for the escapees, but then quickly fell silent, remembering that such sympathies were illegal. The Emperor was so enraged to see the fairies and witches floating away with the prisoners, he began foaming at the mouth. "High Commander, alert the archers in the city," he ordered. "If you let the fairies get away, I will have your head on a platter." "Yes, my lord," the High Commander said. The High Commander blew a horn to notify the archers' position on the rooftops throughout the capital. The archers were quick to comply, firing hundreds and hundreds of bloodstone arrows to the escapees drifted over the city. The bubbles were pelted by the arrows, which caused many of them to pop and the prisoners to fall from the sky. Bristol waved her wand and restored their bubbles, but she couldn't keep up. "Stitches, Sprout, Bibi, Pip, help me catch them," Bristol said. The witches immediately dived through the air and caught the falling prisoners, just moments before they hit the ground. Unfortunately, the archers' relentless attack showed no sign of slowing down, and the witches quickly ran out of space on their broomsticks. "Yes," Seven cheered as he watched the bubbles burst. "They'll never make it out of the capital. They're all going to drop like flies. Emeralda," Bristol called over her shoulders, "call for backup." Emeralda nodded and pressed a small emerald whistle against her lips. She blew the whistle with all her might, and a sharp tone echoed through the sky. "Sir, look," the High Commander said. "Something's approaching the capital." The Emperor peered into the distance, and every ounce of celebration drained from his spirits. An enormous black shadow appeared on the horizon, moving through the air like a veil caught in the wind. As the shadow flew closer and closer, the Emperor realized it wasn't just one object, but thousands moving together. He raised his binoculars for a closer look and discovered a massive flock of griffins had entered the city. The magic creatures soared between the buildings of Chariot Hills and attacked the archers throughout the capital. They knocked the clansmen off the rooftops with strokes of their wings. They ripped crossbows out of the men's hands with their beaks, and they snatched handful of bloodstone arrows with their claws. The archers were completely caught off guard by the majestic beasts, and many abandoned their posts. While the griffin assaulted the clansmen, the fairies, witches, and prisoners drifted far away from Chariot Hills. Once they were out of the archers' reach, the magical creatures joined the procession of bubbles, and they all soared safely to the horizon. "No!" Seven roared, so loudly the entire city could hear him. "How is this even possible? How could we let them escape again?" The High Commander gulped and took a cautious step back. My sincerest apologies, my lord," he said. "I thought our plan was foolproof." The Emperor's binoculars began to crunch under his tight grip, but he suddenly went very still and very quiet. His fury was interrupted by something strange he had spotted in the sky. "Wait a second," Seven said. "Where did the fairy godmother go? She and the fat witch aren't with the others." The Emperor scanned the horizon over and over again, but Bristol and Lucy had disappeared. "My lord, your orders, my lord," the High Commander asked. "Gather your men and search the city at once," Seven demanded. "They're still here." Bristol and Lucy's bubbles descended into the Chariot Hills town square and popped on impact. As soon as they landed, Bristol took off running, and Lucy sprinted after her. Well, the rescue was a smash, but the performance was a flop. Lucy gripped. "I guess that's what I get for casting amateurs. There's nothing worse in show business than a novice who thinks they can improvise." Bristol abruptly stopped in her tracks and looked around like she was lost. She barely recognized the city she had grown up in. All the buildings were covered in silver banners bearing the Emperor's face or the Radius Brotherhood's white wolf symbol. All the doors and windows were boarded up or chained shut, and the statues of the tributes to past rulers had been removed or demolished. The streets were also covered in large piles of ashes, although Bristol couldn't tell what had been burned. A smoky haze still lingered in the air, making it hard to see more than a few yards in each direction. "Bristol, what's wrong?" Lucy said. Why did we stop moving? Everything looks so different I can't tell which building is which anymore. Is there a town directory somewhere?" "No, but maybe I can make one." Bristol closed her eyes and visualized Chariot Hills from her childhood. She waved one arm in a large circle, and thousands of tiny lights emanated from the tip of her wand, as if she was spraying the trees in a glittery mist. However, the lights didn't stick to the buildings as they were now, but recreated a city as Bristol remembered it. After she opened her eyes and got her whereabouts, the lights disappeared. "The library's over there," she said. Follow me. We don't have much time." Bristol grabbed Lucy's hand and pulled her toward a building with a glass dome at the far end of the town square. Just like the other buildings, the library was covered in silver banners, but unlike the others, the library's front steps were surrounded by a tall metal fence. A sign bolted to the fence read, "Subjects beware. Under Section 2 of the Emperor's Radius Constitution, this building is officially closed to the public. Unauthorized access is forbidden. Trespassers will be sentenced to death." The warning made Bristol's blood boil. She blasted through the fence with her wand, and then Lucy hurried up the front steps and kicked the double doors open. As soon as they stepped inside the dark building, Bristol's stomach turned, The library had been ransacked beyond recognition. All the furniture was knocked over and the seat cushions had been ripped apart. The large silver globe that once stood regally in the center of the first floor now lay in pieces across the carpet. And most horrifying of all, every bookshelf in this 3-story library was empty. Slim pickings, Lucy said. No, this isn't right, Bristol said. This place used to be full of books. What do you think happened to them? Lucy asked. 7 must have hidden them somewhere, she said. Let's have a look around and see if they left anything behind. Bristol and Lucy wandered through the aisles of the spacious library like rats in multi-level maze. Unfortunately, not a single page had survived the Emperor's purge. Even the Justice's secret chamber, which Bristol had discovered when she worked as a maid, was completely vacant, defeated. Bristol began pacing by a window on the 3rd floor. Her gaze drifted toward the town square outside, and her whole body went tense. It had suddenly dawned on her what had created all the ashes in the streets. 7 didn't hide the books. He burned them, Bristol said in disbelief. I'm confused, Lucy said. Why would 7 burn a bunch of books? Bristol sighed and shook her head. Because reading inspires thinking inspires ideas, and ideas inspire change, and nothing threatens a tyrant more than change. Lucy groaned and made fists with both hands. God, I hate that guy, she declared. Just when I think it is impossible to loathe someone more, he always proves me wrong. Luckily, books can be replaced, Bristol said. Well, most books can be replaced. Lucy gulped. Do you think it was destroyed with the others? Honestly, I doubt it was even here to begin with. A book like that would definitely have caught my attention when I was a maid, and I don't remember seeing anything like even remotely like it, not even in the Justice's private collection. But this is the only library we haven't searched. If it isn't here, then where is it? Bristol went quiet as she asked herself the same question. However, her train of thought was interrupted by a strange red light that began to glow around them. She and Lucy turned around and saw the Readiest Emperor standing at the end of the aisle, as his bloodstone wardrobe radiated crimson light through the dark library, and his unwavering scowl radiated pure hatred. 7. At first, Bristol was glad to see the Emperor. Part of her wanted to believe 7 was the dashing young prince who had swept her off her feet, not the dangerous young man who had tried to kill her. I'm guessing your real family is alive and well, 7 sneered. They've been safe and sound for months, Bristol said. The Emperor's mouth curved into a sinister grin, but the hatred never faded from his eyes. I have to give you credit where the credit is due, he said. That was quite a stunt you pulled off in the Colosseum. Sadly, your most impressive charade will be your last. The Emperor snapped his fingers, and he was joined by his High Commander and the Readiest Brotherhood. The clansmen backed off, Bristol and Lucy into a wall at the very end of the aisle. Bristol desperately wanted to wave her wand and knock the men across the library, but she knew magic was useless against their bloodstone weapons. With his guards in place, the Emperor strolled toward the girls and looked Bristol closely in the eye. Tell me, Bristol, exactly how many lives do you have? 7 asked. On second thought, let it be a surprise. I'm willing to kill you as many times as it takes. Killing me won't ensure your victory, Bristol said. It doesn't matter how many laws you enforce, how many lies you tell, or how many books you burn. Your day of reckoning will come. Your people are much smarter and stronger than you think. With or without me, it's only a matter of time before they get sick of your tyranny and rise against you. And that's where you're wrong, he said. You see, a successful residence takes courage, it takes intelligence, it takes resilience, and people aren't born with those qualities. No. Bravery has to be inspired. Brilliance has to be championed. Boldness has to be encouraged. But if you destroy everything that nurtures a society, then society will never gain the tools to destroy you. And nothing will dishearten my people more than seeing the great fairy godmother's head on a pike. Dishearten this, you walking sunburn, Lucy shouted. Swoosh! Lucy shoved the nearest bookcase with all her might, and wham! The bookcase fell directly on top of the Emperor, pinning him to the floor. He moaned and struggled to free himself, but the bookcase was too heavy. "Now that's how you improvise," Lucy said. "Sorry, Bristol, you didn't want to keep chatting with him, did you?" "I'm just jealous I didn't think of that first," Bristol said. "Don't just stand there, kill them!" Seven screamed at his men. The clansmen charged toward Bristol and Lucy with their swords and spears raised. Lucy hit the floor with a fist, and it sent a giant ripple through the carpet. The ripple made all the bookcases in the aisle begin to teeter until, one by one, the bookcase came crashing down on the clansmen. "Nice one," Bristol told Lucy. "Thanks," she said. "I did the same thing to escape a distillery once, but that's a story for another time. Let's get out of here." Bristol and Lucy raced down the aisle, leaping over the bookcases and the clansmen trapped beneath them. Unfortunately, Lucy's ripple was much more powerful than she intended. As she and Bristol hurried to the next aisle, the bookcases began crashing down all around them. "Lucy, make it stop," Bristol said. "You know I can't stop anything I start," Lucy said. "My magic is like eating junk food." Without time to think, the only thing the girls could do was run while the falling bookcases chased them through the third floor like a giant game of dominoes. As they reached the stairs, bookcases began toppling over the railings. The cases crashed into the lower levels, triggering similar domino effects across all the aisles in the library. By the time Bristol and Lucy reached the ground floor, every bookcase in the library had been knocked over. Lucy let out a nervous laugh as she eyed the wreckage. "I bet you're glad you aren't the maid anymore," she said. The girls dashed to the exit, but as soon as they reached the double doors, they came into an abrupt halt. The library was surrounded by the army of the dead. Bristol and Lucy were trapped. Once the girls were spotted, the dead soldiers charged inside. "Gosh, these guys are like cockroaches. They just keep coming and coming," Lucy said. "How are we going to get past them?" Bristol glanced around the library, looking for a quick escape, and her eyes landed on a glass dome in the ceiling. "Quick, hold on to my waist," she said. "Why?" Lucy asked. "It's my turn to improvise." Lucy wrapped her arms around Bristol's waist as tightly as she could. Bristol raised her hand toward the ceiling, and a bright light blasted from the tip of her wand. The light engulfed Bristol and Lucy, and suddenly they shot through the dome like a shooting star. The dome shattered, and glass rained down on the skeleton soldiers. On the third floor, the High Commander and the Readiest Brotherhood began to crawl out from underneath the heavy bookcases. Once they were free, the clansmen raced to the Emperor and helped push the bookcases off his body. "My lord, are you hurt?" the High Commander asked. "I'm fine," the Emperor said as he got to his feet. "Where is the fairy godmother?" "She and her accomplice escaped the library, sir." "They what?" The news sent the Emperor into a furious rage. He grabbed the High Commander by the shoulders and pushed him through the nearest window. "The High Commander has been dismissed," Seven said, and then pointed to the nearest clansman. You're the new High Commander. Disappoint me and you'll suffer the same fate. Is that understood?" The clansman's eyes grew wide and under his silver mask, and he dived into a quick bow. "I'm at your service, my lord," he said, with a nervous quiver in his voice. "Good," Seven said. "Now, the fairy godmother is up to something. I can feel it in my bones. We have to figure out what she's planning." What was she doing in the library, sir?" "Isn't it obvious?" Seven snapped. "She was looking for a book." "But what sort of book, sir?" The Emperor gazed through the broken window, as if he might find the answer in the desolate town square, but nothing came to him. "I don't know," he said, "but whatever it is, we need to find it before she does."